All right, Tanya Summary Shiur. It's week 18, Kanai Nahara, and we're doing chapters 38 and the first part of 39. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So last week we were discussing the importance of physical mitzvahs and how they're in a certain way greater than mitzvahs which involve intellect and the like. And we're going to continue on that, but at the same time we're going to be turning it a little bit to emphasize some importance of kavanah over the actual mitzvah itself. And we're going to be discussing the interplay between those two, the action of a mitzvah and the intent behind it. So the Alter Rebbe says that based on what we've been discussing about the greatness of physical mitzvahs, how its effect in the world and the like, the Alter Rebbe says we can understand the psak halacha, which is that thinking is not like speaking. And if a person only thought Kriya Shema, they're not Yetzah. And the Alter Rebbe says that this is because of the great effect that happens when a person even moves their lips. Because the neshama doesn't itself need any rectification, doesn't need to have any fixing, etc. But the body is kind of unrefined, it's physical. It's part of this world which doesn't inherently acknowledge godliness. And when we say Kriya Shema, Berachas HaMazon, all of these mitzvahs which are dependent in speech, when we do the action of speaking instead of just the thought process of speaking, the action of speaking actually refines us and refines the world around us. At the same time, says the Alter Rebbe, we also need to acknowledge what the Chachamim say, that tefillah or brachos without kavanah are like a body without a soul. So the Alter Rebbe sets out to explain, and he says that everything is really sustained by Hashem. Even rocks have some kind of godly vitality which sustains them. Plant life has, if you would say more, you get to see that in the sense that they grow. Animals can walk around, and they can make sounds, they can do independent things, and humans are able to think, and we're able to speak coherently in complex sentences. All of these things give more of an appreciation of the fact that there's something behind whatever it is, behind everything. And at the same time, you can still say that there's a division between people and animals, or animals and plant life and inanimate life. And the Alter Rebbe says that this difference can be chalked up to how concealed is the godliness in that particular thing. So this is a mashal, not to get too caught up in it, but what the Alter Rebbe says, how this relates to mitzvahs and kavanah, he says that even though, yes, the ultimate may be to refine the world, it's true, but at the same time, the soul of the thing, the same way that a person has a higher level of soul and that expresses their godly source in a greater way to the point that you can see a notable difference between a person and an animal. In the same way, when a person does a mitzvah and there's a kavanah to the mitzvah, there's a soul given to the mitzvah. It's not just the physical action happening in the same way that you have something inanimate and the inanimate thing. It just sits there and it truly exists. It's really there. You could have a person that does a mitzvah and the mitzvah exists. It's truly there. The effect really happened in the world. But at the same time, if that mitzvah has kavanah, it has a soul to it, and that soul it expresses the godliness that is within the mitzvah in a greater way than a mitzvah without kavanah. So the Alter Rebbe says that in general, both the mitzvahs and their kavanahs can be divided into two categories. You have mitzvahs which are physical action, hard action, that whatever kavanah it'll be, the essence of the mitzvah is still about the physical effect. And then he says there's other mitzvahs which are higher than that. They're mitzvahs which are dependent in speech or in thought, like Berachas HaMazon or learning Torah. And even though these mitzvahs need to have some kind of physical analog to the kavanah, that really the mitzvah is dependent on the intent, but at the same time you need to have something physical that it could latch onto, as we discussed in chapter 37. So the mitzvah is on a higher level. It's still a mitzvah which is dependent on physicality, that's what we're saying, but ultimately it exists on a higher kind of plane. So the Alter Rebbe says those are two categories in mitzvahs themselves. And the Alter Rebbe says that in a similar way you have two different categories of kavanah. So he says that there's two kinds of, for example, love that a person can have for Hashem. There's natural inborn love, which we're definitely going to be discussing more in later chapters. It's going to become a big focus. There's natural inborn love that every Jew has for Hashem. And then there's love that a person can arouse within themselves by contemplation, by meditation, and these are the two categories that you have in love, and the same thing with all of the other feelings a person can have for Hashem. There's the natural, the thing which just exists within a person, that when a person does a mitzvah, it's possible they're not arousing any kavanah, but they could be arousing a kavanah of just, I'm a Yid, and as a Yid, of course, I love Hashem. So when I do the mitzvah, I do it because I love Hashem, and I want to connect to Hashem, etc. And that's just the basic kavanah, and it's good and important to have a level of kavanah, as we were saying. The Alter Rebbe says there's a higher level of kavanah, of not just a kavanah that this is my natural inclination, this is what I'm born with, but a kavanah of I'm going to be very intentional, I'm going to think very thoroughly about why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing, and how that relates to me and Hashem, and doing the mitzvah with that kavanah is doing the mitzvah with that, in a sense, that higher level of kavanah. So the Alter Rebbe says that these are the two levels of kavanah that exist for mitzvahs in general. So that concludes chapter 38, and for chapter 39, there's going to be a lot of mentions of Kabbalistic concepts, and I thought about it a bit, and for Tanya Summary Shiur, I don't think it's really the function of the shiur to go in depth into these things, but there's a very good letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which was published in English, and I believe it's called The Four Worlds, and it's a very good resource for anyone that wants to understand more about these concepts. But just for the sake of the Summary Shiur, there's 4 worlds in general. We're going to be discussing 2, maybe 3 of them in this first part of chapter 39, and in Mirza Hashem, next week we're going to be discussing more of the 4th one. And in general, these worlds are called Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, and they're in that order from highest to lowest. And we're going to be now discussing mostly Yetzira and Bria. So the Alter Rebbe says that the reason why Malachim are called Chayes, Psukim, and by Chazal, is because in general, most Malachim find their place in the world of Yetzira, a spiritual realm, spiritual level of, spiritual plane of existence, if you will. And on that plane of existence, there's a lot of feeling, there's a lot of emotion, but there's not a lot of intellect, because intellect is in the world of Bria. So the Malachim, on their plane of existence, they can't properly appreciate the feelings that come from Hashem, which come through meditation, which come through contemplation. They know the feeling is there, but the higher level of a kavanah, which comes through intellect, through contemplation, they're not able to properly appreciate. This is not the case with neshamas. Neshamas are rooted in Bria, they're rooted in this higher level in which godly intellect is appreciated, and as such, they are able to appreciate this higher level of a connection, a love, and whatnot with Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe says, we need to understand, what is this referring to? This is referring to Olam Haba. This is referring to the appreciation that a neshama gets. A neshama wants to have an appreciation of Hashem. So the reward for the neshama is, this appreciation of Hashem in all of its different layers and all of the different ways that it can be expressed. So the Alter Rebbe says, you might have a question, which is, we know that Malachim stand on a much higher spiritual level than us down here. We do lowly things. And the Alter Rebbe says, you might have a person that when they do mitzvahs, they're also doing it only with a natural emotion. They're not doing it with an emotion which comes through intellect. So in that case, how is the neshama standing higher than the Malachim? Because the neshama is rooted in Bria, which is a place where God's intellect, where Hashem's intellect is able to be felt and appreciated. And because the neshama is rooted there, it's able to appreciate it. Okay, but you're saying that the reward is coming ultimately from this place down here, from a place where the neshama is not necessarily doing mitzvahs with this level of contemplation. So in that case, how is the neshama able to stand there? So the Alter Rebbe says that the reason why the neshama is able to appreciate godliness in this way when it goes to this world of Bria, the reason why is because ultimately when it went down here, it transformed the world. And when they transform the world, what happens is not just that they get a reward, per se. What happens is the mitzvahs that they do are literally like a part of godliness in a very complicated way. But it's really an expression of godliness in the world. So really what they're accomplishing is very, very great. And it's so great to the point that it's able to pull the neshama up a level, that even though, it was done with a very basic kind of feeling towards Hashem, but ultimately what happens is so great that it's able to pull the neshama up so that it's able to appreciate godliness on the level of this world of Bria. So that concludes chapter 39, part 1. Next week we're going to be discussing more of the world of Atzilus, that higher world that I mentioned, and different levels of Aveda.